Hello to all of our listeners out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 5 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, recorded November 23, 2015. I'm flying solo this evening, and I'm your host, Andrew. I'm an instructor, gear reviewer at everydaytechcool.com, competitive shooter, and a gun club director. We'd like to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit canadianpatriotpodcast.com/feedback or email the show at feedback@canadianpatriotpodcast.com. I also have some good news for our listeners. We're now available on Stitcher, so you're able to listen to us on Stitcher. That's our good news about that. Before we get into the big part of the show tonight, I'd like to talk about an experience I had this past weekend doing a two-gun match. So at my home club, the Guelph Rod and Gun Club in Guelph, Ontario, Team Hoser had a two-gun match, pistol shotgun, and I worked as an RO and was able to shoot the match and came in 4th in the manual division. And big thanks to Jeff, who couldn't make it out this evening to be on the show with us. I ended up actually borrowing his Benelli to shoot 3/4 of the match with. Unfortunately, my Remington 870 bit the dust. I'm getting some kind of a weird sear issue where the hammer doesn't always drop. The trigger's pulled, but it's like the sear's not quite letting go. So I did what every law-abiding Canadian gun owner does. I went to Tim Hortons and I bought a new gun. And for our video listeners, I have a new Benelli here on the screen. And for our audio listeners, you'll need to imagine me holding up a new Benelli Supernova. That's a 28-inch barrel with a 3.5-inch chamber. And out of the box capacity, it gets 4 rounds in the mag with 2 3/4 shells. So I'll be jamming a magazine tube extension on there so that we can get up to at least being able to have 8 4-division capacity for 3-gun. So with my 870 being out of commission and having had some problems in the past, I found a used Benelli Supernova on Gun Nuts on Saturday night or Sunday morning, and met the fellow at the Tim Hortons. The guy doesn't live very far away. He was driving by on the 401, stopped at the Tim Hortons. I traded him some cash for a new gun and a couple upgrades, and we should be ready to rock and roll. So other than that, overall the match was really well run, as always. Steve and the Team Hoser guys put on a good match, and I think there was 40 odd people out that we had. 2 groups, morning and afternoon. Jeff and I both ended up ROing, and then of course I used his shotgun to run through the stages myself. So with that, we'll move into the news. The news this evening, the first piece I want to look at is the Beowulf magazines, or "Oh my God, the sky is falling." I don't know if everybody saw this. I think it broke on Gun Owners of Canada first. Actually, before we go any further, I'm going to put that shotgun away and open my beer. All right, so now I've got my beer. That's better. All right, so Beowulf magazines, or "Oh my God, the sky is falling." This was originally, I think, on Canadian or Gun Owners of Canada was the first place I saw it, and I've since seen stuff in Caliber magazine and I guess it's a press release, an email distribution from the CSSA. In the show notes, we'll have a link to the Caliber magazine article. But yeah, actually, we'll do the Caliber magazine article. The link will be in the show notes for that. And the title of that article is "The RCMP Letter Declares 50 Beowulf Magazines Prohibited," which I don't think is entirely accurate. I mean, it's the RCMP, and hey, it's Canadian gun laws, so it doesn't have to make sense. But Aztec Armory is an outfit in the U.S. that exports magazines into Canada. Or I guess they have an office in Canada and in the U.S., and they're bringing 50 Beowulf mags into Canada. for whatever reason, their last import was denied. Now, the RCMP, one of their firearms people, has published an opinion that the magazines are a prohibited device. As far as I can tell, it's the magazines in this particular lot that were being imported that were the prohibited device. I don't think it's actually all the 50 Beowulf mags that are prohibited at this time. And even if it were, it's an unenforceable change. There's how many tens of thousands of 50 Bea mags out. They're prohibitively expensive. Well, maybe not prohibitively expensive, but they do seem to me awfully expensive for what they are. RCMP Bulletin 72 regarding magazine capacity is the bulletin that clarified the LAR mags. So that's the 10 round, or I'm sorry, no, that is the 50 Beowulf magazines being able to hold 15 rounds of 5.56 ammunition. Before that, there was an opinion bulletin from the RCMP regarding LAR mags being able to use a pistol mag and a rifle. The way that the laws are written, everyone that owns guns in this country knows Canadian gun laws do not make sense. The RCMP can decide to prohibit things somewhat willy-nilly with very little oversight. The prohibited device in this case doesn't seem to be all of the Beowulf mags, just these particular set being imported from Aztec Arms. And there's no record. Magazines aren't serialized. It's not like they're going to go around and collect these up. And even if they could, it's not like criminals are committing a lot of crimes with AR-15s and 50 Beowulf mags. I mean, if you really wanted scary high-capacity magazines, just use a regular P-mag or a regular aluminum 30-rounder and pop out the rivet that pins it to 5, put the other 25 in, and have a regular magazine at that point. So, I mean, the little 5-cent piece of metal rivet isn't stopping criminals. I don't see them going out and spending gobs of money buying 50 Beowulf magazines to have what were or what still could be legal magazines. However, if anyone wants to sell some 50 Beowulf magazines, I will happily buy them, and I'm sure so will Mike and Canmore if anyone ever asks. So I think that's a lot to do about nothing. The second piece we want to touch on today is France to allow off-duty police to carry arms, and this comes from the local.fr, which is a French English language newspaper. No, wait, an English language French newspaper. It's a newspaper from France. It's written in English so I can read it without having to Google Translate half the words. The idea here is some sort of, I think, Ministry of the Interior, possibly. They're called the Directorate General of Police. Sent out a memo saying that they're going to allow officers to carry their firearms while off duty. Currently, France allows their police officers to carry their firearms if they're going to or coming from duty, provided that they're wearing their bulletproof vests. The change with this is going to be that they're going to allow all police to be armed, and police in most, if not all, jurisdictions to be able to carry those firearms while they're off duty. There is a caveat with that they're going to have to wear their special red police armband. And I'm not terribly familiar with this, but apparently in France, plainclothes police officers have to wear an armband that's red and indicates that they're police, so that they're not confused for whoever else you would confuse police officers in plainclothes for, I guess. Again, I don't go to France. I'm not familiar with French customs. It just seems silly to have them in a, I don't know, if they have to wear these red police armbands all the time, which I don't think they do. I think they only have to wear it if they use their guns or if they're in a situation where they need to identify themselves as police. If they have to wear them all the time, I think it makes them a target. So hopefully I read this right in that it's only that they have to have their red armband, but they don't have to be wearing it unless they're actually using their gun. Hopefully, if they actually have to use their gun, there's some oversight there that says they're allowed to use their gun before they have to put their armband on. Otherwise, we're wasting time waiting for them to put their armband on before they shoot terrorists. So we'll see. Hopefully that makes some sense. Good on France for allowing their off-duty police officers to carry firearms. Hopefully that means that the French restriction on arms is going to be something that the government looks at, and they allow everyday French people to carry their arms for self-defense, not just the police. One other interesting statistic with this is only 45% of French police officers carry firearms, which I thought was kind of unusual. I didn't realize it was that low of a number. I thought it was unlike places like Britain where they don't have a lot of armed police. I thought it was France was a lot closer to the US or Canada where more or all of the police officers carry a gun. But I guess it's only certain police forces or certain jurisdictions that carry guns all the time. Some places they don't. Right? Seems like an interesting thing. Hopefully that's going to discourage any more terrorism in France. And with that, we'll move into the main topic of this evening's show. And the main topic tonight is preparing for winter in Canada. So what is this going to be? The main topic tonight, we're going to talk about getting ready for winter, which unfortunately in some parts of Canada, southern Ontario, the part of Canada I live in, we're already in winter. I have a couple of centimeters of snow in the last 2 days. I can't say I'm terribly happy about it. But getting ready for winter in Canada, getting ready for winter in general, what do we need to do in order to make sure that we're ready? So we'll start with stuff in and around the home you should be doing. A list of things that I wish somebody would have given me when I was younger and not quite so wise, the ripe old age of not yet 30. Actually, before we go into that, let's hate on the education system in this country for just a moment, because don't worry, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But don't worry about how to do taxes. Don't worry about how to vote. Don't worry about how to winterize your home. Don't worry about, basic first aid. But I can tell you Pythagorean theorem and calculating which side of the triangle is the short one. So with that, winterizing your home, first thing is going to be on the HVAC part of the house, your furnace, your AC system. We're going to want to make sure that the furnace runs if it hasn't been running. Make sure that the pilot light is on if it's gas. Make sure the furnace works. Make sure the furnace works before it's negative 20 out, because that's not the day you're going to want to find out the furnace isn't running. You're also going to want to replace the filter, particularly if you turned the furnace off last winter and haven't been using it. The furnace only works as well as the filter that's in it. The filter does have to be installed in a particular direction, and they do come in specific sizes. So you want to make sure you have one that fits, and you want to have one installed with the correct direction of airflow. The next thing with the HVAC system you're going to want to do, or at least that you may want to consider doing, if your home doesn't already have one, installing a programmable thermostat. Because again, I live in the wonderful jurisdiction of Ontario where we pay through the nose for hydro. So we want to be as efficient with our heating as possible. I use a Nest thermostat. I don't think it especially matters which one. I like the Nest. It's super easy to install. It's literally unplug the old thermostat, plug in a couple of wires. In my case, it was 2 wires, but it varies based on what you have in your home. If there's an AC unit, if there's different neutrals or grounding wires, what kind of a furnace it is, how old the furnace is, etc. But it's very easy to wire. If you have a thermostat already, unplug the old one, label some wires, plug it into the Nest, turn the Nest on, connect it to your Wi-Fi. The whole process takes 30 minutes. Basically, if you can install a router, you can install a Nest thermostat. Benefit to that, of course, you can use it with your smartphone. So I can turn the Nest on and off from the office. We have it on a schedule, which is actually the big thing with the programmable thermostat, whether it's a Nest or not, is having it on that schedule so that it turns on and your house is warm when you wake up in the morning, and it's not running during the day when everyone's at work, and it's still keeping the house above freezing. So we keep our home at 21 degrees, and it goes down to about 18.5 when we're out or when we're asleep. Um, the next thing that you're going to want to look at is using your curtains effectively. So we have awesome thermal and solar aspects, as long as you're aware of them. So if you have windows that are facing southward, or if you have morning or evening sunlight that you can get in through the windows, having your curtains open to catch that solar aspect will give you a little bit of free energy. And then, of course, you want to use your curtains to keep drafts out the rest of the time. So there's a balance there, opening and closing curtains. If you have a fireplace, you're going to want to have that checked, make sure that your chimney's serviceable, make sure there's nothing wrong with the fireplace. Depending on whether or not it's wood or gas, your gas fireplace, you want to make sure your pilot's light's on. Your wood fireplace, you want to make sure you don't have any buildup before you go to light it. So that would be a bad time. At the same time, you're also going to want to check your chimney and flue. And this is one of those things that, kind of like your HVAC system, if you're not comfortable with it, if you're not familiar with it, you may want to have a professional come out and have someone that knows what they're doing take a look at it before you light it up for the first time this season. Because fireplace fires are not a good time. The other thing with your fireplace, I'm sure most people are going to be aware, if they have a fireplace, it works really well if you're sitting in front of it. It doesn't work really well anywhere else. So something you're going to want to make sure you're doing when you're not having a fire is make sure the flue is properly closed, so that you're not adding a draft when the fire is not running. The next thing that you can look at doing, and some people will no doubt argue with me on this, set your ceiling fans to slow and make sure they're running clockwise if you're going to use them. And the reason for this is it will force all of the warm air from the ceiling downward as long as it's slow. If your ceiling fan is running very fast, it'll make the air feel cooler because of wind chill, even though it's forcing the warm air to go down. So the trick is, with ceiling fans, make sure you're going slow, make sure you're going clockwise. So a lot of the fans will have a reverse switch on them. So make sure that switch is set so the fan spins in that clockwise direction. The big thing that you're going to want to do is all of your windows and doors, checking for leaks, drafts, anything like that. So go around, check all your doors, make sure the door sweeps are installed, make sure that you've got good weather sealing, make sure that there isn't any drafts coming in through the doors, because that's a big thing that's easy to eliminate. A door sweep's a couple of dollars. They're easy to install. It's a couple of screws. It's 20 minutes of your time. New weather stripping is the same kind of thing. A roll of weather stripping is pretty cheap, $10-15, a couple of minutes of your time, cut it to length, pull the adhesive backer off and stick it in the door frame. Same thing with windows. You're going to want to make sure those are all sealed up. Might need to do a little bit of caulking, going around, making sure there's no issues with the seals on the windows. The other thing on some doors you may want to add is what's the name of it? Draft dodger. So there's a couple of, you can get these pre-made from some stores. You can make them. Basically, just you want to put something at the bottom of the door where there's a gap between the floor and the door to stop drafts from going over the threshold. So the door sweep will help with this on the outside doors, but a draft dodger might help on the inside. Rolling up a towel will work, but you can get pretty fancy with this, filling socks up or making something. Or I've seen heavy duty ones at the store that they've got a couple of pounds. They've got some kind of a hollow fill to them. Stick them up against the door, help with the drafts there. The other thing, if you've got particularly old windows, I lived in a home that had aluminum windows for a while, and this was a giant pain in the butt in the wintertime. So the aluminum windows would leak like crazy. You'd stand next to it, and it feels like there's a breeze coming through. So you may want to consider plastic sheeting for your windows. Plastic sheeting is, again, one of those things that's pretty inexpensive. A decent kit to do a couple of windows, you're looking under $50 at Home Depot, Canadian Tire. Clean around the window first, put the double face tape on the window frame, put the plastic sheeting carefully on the double face tape, and then use a heat gun or a high temperature hair dryer to shrink the plastic film, being careful not to shrink it too much so that you don't put any holes in it, as then it becomes ineffective. All you're doing is building a thermal barrier, so you've got an envelope of air inside the plastic sheeting between the window and the plastic sheet, and then the rest of the room. So it's working like insulation. So that'll help with your drafts on your older windows. The other thing with windows, of course, making sure you have those heavyweight curtains on there. That's going to help with drafts as well. It doesn't stop the cold air from going in or out, but it's at least going to stop it from blowing around if there's a particularly bad draft or if it's windy. A couple of things you're going to want to check outside. The first is going to be to trim your trees. It's probably too late where I am to be doing that because we already have snow. But if you were smart a couple of weeks ago where I live, you would have been out trimming your trees and making sure that that's all dealt with. And the reason that we're doing this now is so that it's not brutally cold and we're dealing with it before there's snow on the trees and the trees have limbs that break. It's bad enough having to deal with tree limbs that break in the middle of winter because of the weight of the snow or ice. It's going to be worse to deal with it because it's cold and miserable out. So if we can get that addressed before it's too terribly cold and miserable, that would be better for everyone concerned. So trimming those trees, particularly anything that's old or rotten or overhanging an area that it could damage something else, overhanging a pool or a car or part of a building or a shed. While we're outside, we're also going to winterize our AC unit. What this typically means is you're going to want to make sure that any lines going in and out of the house are drained of any water, and also the drip pan. This is going to extend the life of the unit, particularly if there is any water in those lines. You don't want that to freeze and have any ruptures. Then some people are also going to put a cover over their AC unit. Since we're outside and we're doing this while it's clean, since we're doing this while it's warm and not miserable, you're going to want to clean your gutters. No doubt you've got all of your fall leaves in there. And again, this is something we want to do now so we don't have to deal with it in the spring because it's going to be miserable when the snow and the ice on your roof's melting. And now your gutters are overflowing and nothing's working and there's water everywhere. And now you have to climb up on your roof and deal with that. It's still icy and it's not a good time. So if you can get up there now, clean those gutters. Make sure everything's ready for when it starts to snow. And the last thing that we want to talk about inside your home for winterizing is checking your 72-hour kits and your bug out bags. And I'm not going to go into a great level of depth with those today because I'd actually like to do whole future shows on those topics. But for your 72-hour kit, basically, you want to make sure that you're self-sufficient for 3 days in the event that you get snowed in. So what is self-sufficient for 3 days? Water, food, heat, sanitation. Those are going to be your big things. You got to worry about it for 3 days. So pipes shut down. You've got a water main out. How's your family going to drink? You're probably going to want to have some water stored. Be careful about storing water in a place where it could freeze. The vessel the water is stored in may rupture. Inside your house is probably not a problem unless we get to the next item, which is going to be heat. So if you haven't died from dehydration, the next thing is you might freeze to death. I know, what a gloomy show today. So the idea is to not freeze to death. Hopefully your furnace is running. Hopefully if it's electric, you don't have any down power lines, or if it's natural gas. The grid shouldn't go down for natural gas, but it could. I don't think there's really a lot of other ways people are going to be heating their homes coming off of another grid. I guess if they've got a heat pump, they're probably self-sufficient for that, although they'd probably need electricity to run it. With the heat, I'm a big proponent of having an alternative heat source. We stock a propane Mr. Buddy heater, like a hunting camp kind of a heater. Runs off a regular propane cylinder, the same as what you use for your barbecue. Barbecue cylinder will run out for 100 and plus 110 some odd hours. So a couple of barbecue cylinders, you've got heat for a week. Not a fan of the idea of running one of these things while you're asleep. They're supposed to shut off in low oxygen environments, but again, depending on what it is, what your model is, what you're comfortable with, I wouldn't run my Mr. Buddy heater while I'm asleep just because I'm worried about the carbon monoxide. But it does make a room awful nice and toasty. It wouldn't heat the whole house, but it'd be pretty good to heat up like my living room or my bedroom. So keep everybody nice and warm. It'll also keep that water that you're storing from freezing as long as you can keep the house above zero. The next thing is going to be your, actually, while we're still on the topic of heat, in your 72-hour kit or possibly near your 72-hour kit, you're going to want to have extra warm clothes. So you're at home, you shouldn't have to worry about this. You should be able to go to your closet and get a sweater, but you're going to want to make sure that if you need one, you know where it is. So it might be worthwhile to store some extra warm clothes right where you store the rest of your 72-hour kit. So that's going to be your some emergency lighting, flashlight, candles, batteries, lots of batteries, a way to charge the batteries, chem lights, possibly like a light stick. Some of your water, probably not all of your water, depends on how much water you're storing. Figure on average adult, you're going to need 3 liters of water a day, 3 days, 9 liters, 2 adults, 18 liters, so on and so forth. So plan on having the right amount of water for that. Plan on being able to heat your home, or at least some rooms in your home, for those 3 days. Again, I stock enough propane to be able to run my heater for about a week. It won't keep my whole house 22 degrees, but it'll keep the house above freezing, which is really what we're going for at that point. Hopefully the natural gas in my case never cuts out, because that would well and truly suck. The next item after heat that you're going to want to be concerned about is food. So again, 3 days, say you can't get out to the store, you're snowed in, you want to make sure you, your family, your kids can eat. If you've already got a big pantry, this probably is less of a concern, but with your 72-hour kit, you're probably going to want to have some snacks, have some energy bars, some protein bars, something that's going to keep you full, some chocolate, something that's going to keep you happy, some snacks, something that'll keep the children happy. As everybody knows the saying, happy wife, happy life. Well, happy wife in the middle of a snowstorm with a power outage, she's having a chocolate bar. Everyone is a happy camper in that situation. The other thing you're going to want to consider with your food is the ability to cook it. You've got a freezer full of food, your power's out, your oven is also not working. So your food is defrosting and you can't cook it. Again, my backup is propane heat. We'd be barbecuing, we'd be using a propane gas camp stove. Again, using these in a ventilated area. I'm not bringing the barbecue in from outside. We all know that's dangerous. Don't bring your barbecue in from outside. It's bad for you. Don't use your barbecue to heat your apartment at night because it's bad for you. Basically, what I'm saying is don't get carbon monoxide poisoning. It's not a good time. So avoid the carbon monoxide poisoning. But do consider having a way to cook some food. Some of your options: food that's already ready to eat. IMPs or MREs, Army type rations. You can eat them cold. They suck. IMPs, Canadian individual meal packages for our military, are not bad cold generally. American style MREs generally are not good warm or cold, but I mean they're okay if you eat them cold. They're not gonna do anything bad. They're just not particularly appealing. They also make civilian equivalents. Again, cold is going to work, warm is better. Some of them have a heater, some of them just require you to stuff them in hot water to heat them up. If you can boil water, you're probably okay. You probably want to be able to boil water anyway, just in case there's a problem with your mains water. If there is an issue where you have a mains burst and your water's out for a couple of days, your 3 liters of water per person per day that you're storing, you're probably going to be okay with. The other thing with that we want to talk about is if you have any pets, you're going to want to make sure you have enough food and water for them. So if you're the kind of person that lets Sparky's bag of food run down to the end and you have to remember on your way home from work that day to get him more, you may want to go ahead and grab an extra bag so Sparky doesn't have to go hungry, or you don't have to share. You will be able to share, of course, some of your human food with your dogs. Not everything, of course. You can't give him that chocolate bar that you were saving for your wife. That wouldn't be very good for him. The other thing you're going to want to have ready to go, and you should have this ready to go all the time, although in the winter you may want to make some additions, is your bug out bag. So again, I'd like to do a whole show on this topic, but a bug out bag in short is you have to leave your home in a hurry. You have to go somewhere else. You're being forced evacuated. There's a tornado, a hurricane, a blizzard coming, and you have been told you must leave. regardless of the time of the year, the contents of your bug out bag there's going to be some commonality. You're going to have your important documents. You're going to have a change of clothes. You're going to have some cash money. You're going to have some tools. You're probably going to have some water and food. In the winter, you're going to want to make some considerations for that. How cold is it? How far do you expect you'll have to travel? How do you have to travel? Are the roads passable? Are you snowshoeing there? Are you being loaded into a bison and the army's taking you out? Like, just be considerate of what's going on in your situations with your bug out bag in the winter. You're probably going to want to consider warmer clothes. You're probably going to want to consider an extra pair of mitts, gloves, a hat, scarf, extra sweater, your regular changes of clothes that you would have anyway, hand warmers, anything like that. You're also going to want to have some considerations. Your water in your bug out bag may freeze, so you may want to have it in a container that you can stuff inside of your jacket to keep it from freezing using your own body heat. Again, food that's appropriate, so energy bars, granola, licorice, that sort of thing. The licorice, in my opinion, is a comfort item. Give kids licorice; they love that. Keeps them happy, keeps you happy. Happy wife, happy life. Same rule applies with children. Same rule applies with pets. If you have a bug out bag and you have Sparky, you should make sure that Sparky's stuff is in your bug out bag. If he needs any special meds, or if you need any special meds, some sort of a bowl for Sparky to drink out of, and food for Sparky to eat. And again, depending on what you're doing and where you're going and how long you're going to be, the amount of stuff in your bug out bag is going to vary. The next thing that you're going to want to prepare is winterizing your car. And part of this is going to sound like common sense stuff to anybody that's a mechanic or does automobile maintenance. Some of it is stuff that, again, I wish they would teach in school, because mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But don't worry about how to do your taxes. Don't worry about how to change your oil. Before we go on a rant about schools, winterizing your car, step 1, snow tires. You live in Canada. It snows. I don't care which part of Canada you live in. You might be able to get away with no snow tires in parts of British Columbia. Southern Ontario, you're getting snow tires. The Maritimes, you're getting snow tires. The Arctic, I don't know if you get anything but snow tires. So install snow tires, check your tire pressure. While you're there, check your 4-wheel drive. If you're not sure, not able to do this on your own, take it to a mechanic that knows how to do this sort of thing. Any tire shop, any mechanic is going to be able to install a set of tires, balance, rotate, make sure they're on, make sure they're torqued. You're also going to want to go back and make sure they're torqued again after you've been driving for a little while. Again, the person installing your tires will tell you when that's going to be, but it's usually very soon after. The reason for this is to check, make sure the lug nuts are holding the tires on properly. Same thing with tire pressure. Check it, make sure it's set up right. It's not something you're going to have to muck around with afterwards. For your 4-wheel drive, if you drive a truck like I do, I don't use my 4-wheel very often. I very rarely off-road, but it is nice to have with slippery conditions, or those couple of times a year I have to get through a field. Have someone that knows what they're doing check the 4-wheel drive, make sure the differential's working properly, make sure the fluids are changed if they need to be. While we're on the topic of fluids, you're also going to want to make sure to change your engine oil. Again, this is something that you're going to be doing on a regular basis anyway, not just because it's winter. But when you do your winter oil change, you're going to want to check your oil viscosity. What this means is how thick or how thin essentially your oil is, how easily it runs. In the wintertime, with the colder temperatures, your oil is going to act thicker. It's going to take longer to get between 2 points. And that can make it harder on your engine during starting from a cold start, because the engine hasn't warmed the oil up. The oil is going to be more viscous, so it's going to have a harder time working. You want the oil to be able to flow easily through the engine to prevent wear on metal on metal. Your car owner's manual should have a list of approved oils for various temperatures. You want to check that. Again, any mechanic is going to be able to look this up and know how to do it. They do it all the time. So if you're not sure what you're doing, take it to a mechanic, have them look. If you can do it yourself, great. Just make sure you do it. While you're there, make sure you change your oil filter if you need to, your air filter, et cetera, belts and hoses, all that good stuff that you would normally be doing while you're doing an oil change. The last one with that, and probably the most overlooked one, change your wiper blades. Also fill up your wiper fluid. Again, you're doing your oil change, you probably check fluids, or you had a mechanic do it. He probably checked fluids because he's a mechanic and he does this all the time and it's his job. Put your winter wiper blades on. Your winter wiper blades are generally going to be rated for snow and ice, and they're going to have more pushing power than what you would typically see in the summertime. So it's less about getting the rain off the car and more about getting built up snow and ice off the windshield of the car. The other thing you may want to consider is having a spare set of wiper blades, because few things suck more than going down the highway and watching your wiper blade fly off, ask me how I know, and having to drive 15 miles in another country, ask me how I know, to have to find a replacement wiper blade. Did I mention it was in a snowstorm? So again, put the winter wiper blades on, check your wiper fluid. You may want to have that spare set of wiper blades ready in your vehicle. And while we're on the topic of things that you may want to have in your vehicle, you should already have an emergency kit in your vehicle. But like your bug out kit or your 72-hour kit, you may want to make some additions from what you would normally have for the winter months. Your emergency kit should already contain booster cables, road flares or reflectors, a flashlight and extra batteries, water, food, candles, a first aid kit, and a cell phone charger. And that is sort of what I consider the minimum for a vehicle emergency kit. On the topic of booster cables, having the booster cables is not enough. You should know how to use them. Not only will you look really cool when you rescue a damsel in distress, you won't look like an idiot when another guy has to show you how to do it on the side of the road. So get a set of booster cables, learn how to use them. It's very easy. There's four clamps, positive, negative. It's easy. One of them has to be grounded. Depends on which vehicle you're on, the one that you're jumping or the one that you're not jumping. So the working one or the not working one, the one that won't start. So strongly encourage everybody to get booster cables and learn how to use them. And again, learning how to use them before it's an emergency and you have to do it on the side of the road in a snowstorm when it's negative 25 and you forgot your gloves, because it's going to suck. We want it to suck as little as possible. Practice your booster cables while it's nice out before it gets to be crappy weather. Road flares or reflectors, you're going to want to have that. Mark your location on the side of the road, because if something happens, if at all possible, you're going to want to pull your vehicle off of the road, and then you're going to want to indicate to other drivers that you're there so that they don't run into you. My preference is actual road flares. The blinky light LED battery-powered things or the reflectors are okay, I suppose, but I want to make sure other people are going to see me, so my preference is actually to have legitimate flares. Flashlight, extra batteries. Again, this is something that I think everybody should have all the time anyway, but it doesn't hurt to have a dedicated flashlight and an extra set of batteries in your vehicle just in case. Bearing in mind that in the cold weather, your batteries may work a little bit differently, so you may want to have another way to get that flashlight to work if it's a hand crank one or an extra set of batteries. Same considerations as always with water. Be aware that in the winter, water freezes. Surprise. I know. I think we actually learned this one in school. The concern, of course, is the container that the water is in. If the water freezes and expands, the container may rupture. That would be bad, particularly when the water melts. In terms of food, same considerations as always. You don't want anything that needs to be cooked. You want something quick and easy, something that's going to keep you satisfied, and probably something that's going to keep you happy. So there's that chocolate bar or the licorice coming in again. Candles are a particular consideration. Candles and a way to light them, matches, lighter, that sort of thing. You want the candles in a container that you're going to be able to put somewhere in your vehicle and have it safe. Candle's going to be for a couple of reasons. A, it's going to be for heat, and B, it's going to be for light. A little candle is not going to sound like much, but in a car with you, with your winter jacket, you're not going to need a whole lot to keep warm, and it's going to be running the engine. You're going to save some gas that way. You just want to make sure you can place it somewhere that it's not going to burn or scorch anything or catch anything on fire. So I'd recommend having like a can to keep that burning inside of That way you can put that on a floorboard. Nothing's going to happen. You get a little bit of warmth off of it. You'll also get a little bit of light because it's a candle. That's how they work. First aid kit, we're not going to go into detail in how to have a first aid kit, but it's a vehicle emergency first aid kit. So all your standard bells and whistles apply: gauze, tourniquet, bandages, pressure dressings, so on and so forth, as your scope of practice allows for. If you can do suturing, great. It may be something that you want to have handy. If you don't know how to use an NPA, don't use an nasal fan an NPA without knowing how to use it. Don't use a tourniquet without knowing how to use it, so on and so forth. Be aware of your scope of practice, but you are dealing with a vehicle first aid kit, so it's probably not likely you're going to need that Band-Aid because you got a boo-boo from a paper cut. If you're dealing with a motor vehicle collision, you might have severed limbs and other atrocious things, and having a tourniquet handy or an Israeli battle dressing, that's going to be a lot more appropriate to stop massive hemorrhaging. The last item, and this is one of those things, again, I think it should always just be in your car, is a cell phone charger for your cell phone. Now, why do I say your cell phone? You have an iPhone. Your wife has an Android phone. They use different chargers. Maybe you want one of each in each of your vehicles. The idea for this is, of course, your cell phone should be charged anyway, just like your car should have gas in it anyway. But you've had a long day at the office, the battery's on 20%, you got stuck on the highway, now the battery's dead. Well, okay, plug it into your car, Bob's your uncle, everything's good. Actually, on that same note, we're going to want to make sure that the gas in our cars is kept as full as we can. I like keeping at least half a tank in the truck. It's up to you. The idea is don't run it empty. You want to have the ability to run the vehicle for a couple of hours on the side of the road as a minimum. If nothing else, to keep the lights on to indicate that you're there and to keep the heater running so that you stay warm. In terms of a more dedicated emergency winter kit, some particular additions that you may want to consider for the winter that you may not carry in your vehicle year round. A small shovel to dig yourself out of whatever pile of snow you just got yourself into. Whether it's a folding e-tool or a small spade, whatever is appropriate for you and your vehicle, some sort of a small shovel, an ice scraper, of course. You're probably using an ice scraper or the back of a credit card anyway to get the ice off your windows in the morning. So you'll want to have one of those, maybe an extra one of those. Extra winter clothing and a blanket, because you're probably going out wearing a toque and your mittens in the winter time, but it's a mild day, or you're wearing your fancy clothes, or there's some situation where you're not wearing your normal heavy winter jacket, your boots, and your mittens and your wool cap and everything else. So extra set of gloves, extra hat, extra scarf, and a blanket in the vehicle, or a couple of blankets in the vehicle so that you can stay warm. If you get stuck behind a pileup on the highway, you have to pull over and you're there for a couple of hours. You want to conserve some gasoline. There's nothing wrong with hiding under a blanket in your winter coat and staying warm that way so as to not have to run the engine and burn that gas. The other thing you may want to consider using, and this is not one of those things for everybody, is a tow rope or a chain. I've had to pull and be pulled people out. I've had to pull people out of, and I've been pulled out of ditches, and having a tow rope in my truck has been immensely helpful for that. Because without it, I wouldn't have been able to get out of the ditch without getting a tow truck there who would have gotten a tow rope and then pulled me out. Similarly, helping other people out of the ditch, stopping at the side of the road to help is great, but if no one has a tow rope, you all stand around looking at each other. So having that rope or chain to be able to pull another vehicle out of the ditch if you have an appropriate vehicle for that, very, very helpful. The last consideration for the winter time is some sort of a grit material. So that's a salt, a sand, or a kitty litter, of all things. Kitty litter actually is very cheap and works surprisingly well for this purpose. The general idea with salt, sand, or kitty litter: put it down near the tires, use your shovel, get it under there. It'll provide you traction. Salt, of course, will melt ice and snow. Kitty litter also works as an absorbent if there's a spill that you need to put, that you need to collect that up. So that pretty well wraps up the things that we think that you should have, or I guess that I think that you should have in your vehicle for winterizing it. For our wonderful Canadian winters. The other things that you may want to consider, of course: putting your roof rack on for your skis or snowboard. and taking off the hitch mount for your bicycles. You're unlikely to use those in the wintertime. We don't have any rapid fire feedback this evening. So if you'd like to email the show, feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com, or you can connect with us on Facebook, facebook.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast. I am, as always, your host, Andrew. This has been our very short episode number 5 on preparing for Canadian winters. You can see my work on everydaytactical.com, where we review gears, guns, beers, and other things that I find tactical, or just generally interesting. And you can stay in touch with me on Instagram or Twitter at edtacticool. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to listen this evening, and we'll see you all again next Monday. With that, I'd like to remind our listeners, you are the true North, strong and free.